Arlo Vex sniffed, coughed, then decided the air on Comet X-43 was marginally better than his last date. The helmet's filter struggled against the traces of sulfuric nothingness, but hell, it was doing a better job than his ex-wife at filtering out his bullshit. He tapped the side of his headpiece, the dull thud echoing through the comms channel like a desperate drummer with an empty audience. "Arlo, you alive in there?" crackled a voice, sassy as a drunk uncle at Christmas dinner. That'd be Lorna, his second-in-command, whose sense of humor was only slightly less toxic than the comet's atmosphere. Barely. Arlo squinted at the horizon, a flat, miserable expanse interrupted only by the occasional jagged rock. "Why the hell are we here again?" "Oh, right, to play rock collector on a giant ice cube. Dark matter, remember. The crap that supposedly makes the universe tick." Lorna's voice dripped with the kind of enthusiasm you reserve for dental visits. "And if we get it before the aliens, we might just get a raise that doesn't insult our intelligence." "A bonus. From the Corp," Arlo chuckled, the kind of laugh reserved for bad jokes and bad luck. "More chance of finding a unicorn out here, but sure, let's humor them." The rest of his team, a ragtag bunch of humanity's finest rejects, fanned out across the rocky terrain. Imagine the worst high school reunion ever, but with space suits and a chance of dying from exposure. Arlo took a moment to appreciate the absurdity of it. A bunch of humans shuffling around the glowing symbols etched into the comet's surface, each one a potential gold mine of dark matter, or, knowing their luck, a trapdoor to their doom. Arlo approached one of the symbols, a swirling mass of lines that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. "You think these ancient whatevers knew about dark matter?" Lorna snorted. "If they didn't, they sure put a lot of effort into making it look impressive. Maybe it's a cosmic joke." "Joke's on them if we make it out alive with a load of dark matter," Arlo replied, kneeling to squint at the pattern like it might reveal its secrets if he stared hard enough. "Or it could explode," chimed in another voice, this one belonging to Zeke, the team's resident pessimist. "Just saying. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Zeke. Remind me to invite you to my next suicide mission," Arlo said, standing up and brushing invisible dust off his suit. "Anytime," Zeke replied, as deadpan as a coroner's report. The team continued their work, each member lost in their own thoughts or complaints, as a low hum filled the air. It started as a gentle vibration beneath their boots, like the comet itself was waking up and was none too pleased about it. Guys," Lorna's voice cut through the crackling tension. "Is it just me, or is the ground moving?" Arlo barely had time to process her words before the ground gave a violent lurch, throwing him onto his back like a toy space ranger. The hum grew to a roar, and the symbols began to glow with an intense, eerie light. "Shit! Everyone back to the ship," Arlo shouted, but the command was swallowed by the cacophony around them. The team scrambled, stumbling over rocks and each other in their haste to reach the safety of their vessel. Above them, the sky seemed to ripple, like reality itself had taken a hit of something questionable. Arlo's lungs burned as he ran, the ship looming like a mirage of salvation. He tripped, cursing as he went down hard, his visor cracking against a jagged outcrop. "Arlo!" Lorna's voice was frantic now, her face a blur above him. "Go, go, I'll catch up," he yelled, waving her off as he struggled to his feet. Pain shot through his ankle, but he ignored it, focusing on the ship like it was the last lifeboat on a sinking Titanic. Behind him, the ground split open with a sound like the universe laughing at its own cruel joke. Arlo risked a glance back and almost wished he hadn't. Rising from the depths was a structure, impossibly ancient and ominously alive. And from its depths emerged figures that looked suspiciously like trouble wrapped in skin that shimmered like nightmares. Aliens. "Looks like we're not alone," Zeke's voice crackled, more amused than terrified. "They don't look like they're here for tea and biscuits," Arlo muttered, limping towards the ship. "Lorna, warm up the engines. We've got company." As Arlo reached the ship, he could see the aliens more clearly. Tall, lean, and disturbingly symmetrical, with eyes that seemed to burn with a light that promised nothing good. Leading them was a figure that could only be described as the cosmic equivalent of a used car salesman, slick, predatory, and probably about to sell them a lemon. "Verky," Arlo spat, recognition clenching his gut. "Figures you'd show up." "Ah, Arlo Vex," Verky's voice was smooth, oily, as if soaked in charm and arrogance. "I see you've stumbled upon our little operation. Little, looks like you've been busy." Arlo gestured at the ritual site, now alive with activity. Verky shrugged with the nonchalance of a man who just remembered he left the stove on. "You know how it is. The universe is vast, resources are scarce. We're just trying to get by stealing from us," Lorna snapped, her glare sharp enough to cut through Arlo's growing migraine. "Borrowing," Verky corrected, a smile playing at the edge of his lips. "We're all friends here, aren't we?" "Friends don't point guns at each other," Arlo said, gesturing to the alien troops now assembling behind Verky, weapons at the ready. "Ah, that's just a precaution," Verky replied, his smile widening. "You can't be too careful." "Precaution, my ass," Zeke muttered, eyeing the aliens with disdain. "More like a welcome party." Arlo frowned, assessing their options or lack thereof. The ship was ready, but the aliens had them outnumbered and outgunned. Still, he'd be damned if he let Verky walk away with the dark matter. "All right, Verky," Arlo said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "What's it gonna take for you to back off?" Verky's eyes gleamed, and Arlo could almost see the gears turning. "A simple trade, perhaps, a token of goodwill between species. And that would be your ship," Verky said, as if offering a cup of sugar to a neighbor. "In exchange, we'll let you leave with your lives." "Generous," Zeke scoffed, crossing his arms. "Tempting, but no," Arlo replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We kinda like breathing." "Oh, I insist," Verky said, his tone the kind usually reserved for negotiating toddlers into bed. "After all, you wouldn't want any accidents, would you?" Arlo clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the situation settle like dust in a forgotten corner. It was a gamble, a dangerous game of chicken on a cosmic scale, and losing wasn't an option. But neither was bending over for these aliens. "How about this?" Arlo said, his mind racing. "You walk away, we walk away. No harm, no foul." Verky chuckled, the sound like gravel in a blender. "Bold, but I think not." Arlo exchanged a glance with Lorna, whose eyes mirrored his own steely resolve. "Then I guess we'll have to do this the hard way." Verky's smile faltered just for a second before he motioned to his troops, who raised their weapons in a synchronized dance of impending doom. But Arlo was already moving, his hand slamming down on a concealed panel on the ship's hull. With a hiss, the ship's automated defenses sprang to life, lasers firing with wild abandon. "Surprise, assholes," Arlo grinned, as chaos erupted around them. The aliens scattered, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Lorna was already at the ship's controls, punching in commands with the efficiency of someone who'd seen way too many action holos. "Get in," Arlo shouted, grabbing Zeke and dragging him towards the open hatch. They tumbled inside, the ship vibrating with the effort of lifting off. Outside, Verky's forces regrouped, their weapons blazing as they tried to ground them. "Lorna, punch it," Arlo yelled, strapping himself in. "Already on it," she shot back, hitting the thrusters with a force that pinned them to their seats. The ship roared into the sky, leaving behind a comet full of secrets and an alien adversary with a grudge. As the comet shrank into the distance, Zeke let out a breath he probably didn't know he was holding. "Well, that was unpleasant." "Just another day in paradise," Lorna quipped, adjusting their course. Arlo leaned back, watching the stars blur past. "Verky won't give up that easily," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lorna glanced over, her smile a mixture of relief and defiance. "Good, I never liked easy," Arlo chuckled, a sound full of dark amusement. "Yeah. Well, let's hope the next part of this adventure comes with fewer aliens and more booze." "Cheers to that," Zeke said, raising an imaginary glass. The ship sped onward, into the uncertain vastness of space, leaving behind a trail of smoke, a comet full of questions, and an alien adversary who would surely remember the day a bunch of humans outsmarted him. But for now, they were alive. And in this universe, that was more than enough of a victory. Arlo Vex stared out the viewport, watching the star-speckled darkness roll past. Somewhere out there, Verky and his crew were likely scheming their next move, plotting to make life hell for him and his team. It was comforting in a way. Some people had nemeses in their lives. Arlo just happened to have one that looked like a cosmic nightmare wearing a suit made of malicious intent. Lorna was tinkering with the ship's controls, her fingers dancing over the console like a pianist on caffeine. You think Verky's got a hobby, other than trying to screw us over, that is. Arlo shrugged, leaning back in his seat. I don't know, maybe he collects stamps. Alien murder stamps. Well, whatever it is, he's got a lot of time on his hands to perfect the art of being a colossal jackass, Lorna replied, her voice carrying the kind of dry humor that would make a desert jealous. Zeke slouched nearby, arms folded and expression set in its usual default mode, grumpy skepticism. I dunno about you guys, but I already missed that Comet. Nothing like the sweet aroma of sulfur and existential dread to start the day. Yeah, and those symbols, Arlo said with a half-smirk, probably just ancient graffiti. Kilrin was here, down with the corp, Lorna snorted. Maybe it was an intergalactic restroom, all those glowing patterns. Alien guide to where not to step. Funny how we're risking our necks for something we can't even see, Zeke grumbled, shifting in his seat. Dark matter, the universe's best-kept joke. Yeah, and we're the punchline, Arlo muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. But if we find it, we'll be richer than the Corp's CEO. Assuming Verky doesn't beat us to it, Lorna pointed out, her tone less cynical and more realistic. Their tech is, well, let's just say we're still using rotary phones in a smartphone universe. Arlo grimaced but nodded. It was true. The aliens' technology was leagues beyond theirs. He'd seen it firsthand, and it was like comparing a paper airplane to a fighter jet. That's what we get for being the universe's late bloomers, Zeke said, stretching his legs with a groan. Show up late to the cosmic party and everyone's already drunk. Well, we're here now, Arlo said, trying to muster some semblance of optimism. And we've got our own tricks. Yeah, like running away real fast, Lorna quipped, glancing back at Arlo with a wry smile. Arlo chuckled, the sound more a bark than a laugh. Fastest ship in this quadrant, remember. Not saying much when you're the only ship, Zeke added dryly. Arlo let out a breath, his mind wandering back to the ritual site on Comet X-43. The memory of the symbols glowing with that eerie light, the ground humming beneath them as if the comet had caught a bad case of indigestion. None of it made sense. And the aliens, with their calm, methodical ceremony, like they were just clocking in for another day at the office. What do you think they were doing back there? Lorna asked, echoing his thoughts. Besides making our lives difficult, probably nothing good, Arlo replied, rubbing his chin. They've got a knack for turning up when things get interesting. Or deadly, Zeke added, his pessimism as reliable as the ship's engine. Same thing, really. Arlo nodded. Verky and his crew had an unsettling way of being one step ahead, like they had a universal cheat sheet. The kind that told them how to crash any party and walk away with the spoils. Their ceremony, Arlo mused aloud, it felt like more than just a display, like they were activating something. Wouldn't put it past them, Lorna said. Maybe those symbols were some kind of cosmic switchboard. Turn on the lights and unleash whatever ancient horror the universe decided to tuck away. Zeke snorted. Sounds like my ex. Arlo shook his head, trying to piece together the scattered bits of information. The dark matter was out there somewhere, and the aliens were closer to it than he'd like. We need to figure out what those symbols mean. If only we had an alien dictionary, Lorna said, rolling her eyes. Or a universal translator that actually worked. Yeah, but that'd be too easy, Arlo replied, tapping his fingers against the armrest. Can't have us getting a leg up in this intergalactic rat race. The ship's comm system crackled to life, a static-filled reminder that things could always get worse. Incoming transmission, Lorna announced, flicking a few switches. Probably Verky wanting to trade recipes for disaster, Zeke muttered. The screen flickered, and sure enough, there was Verky's smug face. Arlo Vex, still breathing, I see. Verky's voice oozed through the speakers, as charming as a snake oil salesman at a convention for the gullible. Arlo leaned forward, glaring at the screen. Verky. To what do we owe this pleasure? Just wanted to touch base, Verky replied, his grin all sharp edges and bad intentions. You left quite the impression back there. Yeah, well, we aim to please, Arlo shot back. What do you want? Verky's smile widened, a predator's grin. I think you know. The Comet holds many secrets and we're keen on unraveling them. The feeling's mutual, Arlo said, his voice steady. But somehow I don't think you're interested in sharing. Verky chuckled, leaning back in his seat. Sharing is caring, Arlo, but unfortunately, care isn't part of our mission statement. Figures, Lorna muttered under her breath. We could work together, Verky offered, though the way he said it made it clear that work together meant do what I say or else. Tempting, but I've got a policy against working with backstabbers, Arlo replied, his tone as dry as the Martian desert. Such distrust, Verky sighed, shaking his head. But I suppose that's to be expected from your kind. Yeah, well, we didn't get this far by being naive, Zeke interjected, his expression a mix of defiance and disdain. Verky's eyes flicked to Zeke, a hint of irritation flashing across his features. In any case, I thought it courteous to warn you. The universe has a way of evening things out. Is that a threat? Arlo asked, tilting his head. A promise, Verky corrected, the malice in his voice unmistakable. With that, the transmission cut, leaving the trio in silence. Well, that was fun, Lorna said, rolling her shoulders. He's definitely got a way with words. Yeah, makes me want to punch him right in his reptilian face, Arlo muttered, crossing his arms. Zeke let out a low whistle. Looks like we're in for a hell of a ride. Great, Arlo said, exhaling sharply. Just what I always wanted. A cosmic game of chicken with the universe's favorite smug bastard. But even as Arlo tried to keep the mood light, he couldn't ignore the tension gnawing in his gut. Verky was dangerous, and the aliens had a head start in the dark matter race. The gap between human and alien technology was more like a chasm, and he had no illusions about the odds stacked against them. We're gonna need a plan, Arlo said finally, glancing between Lorna and Zeke. A damn good one. Plan A, stay alive, Lorna replied, giving him a wry smile. Plan B, see Plan A, Zeke added, though his eyes held a hint of resolve as he met Arlo's gaze. Arlo nodded, determination settling over him like a well-worn cloak. Let's show Verky what humans are made of. You mean stubbornness and bad decisions, Lorna quipped, but there was a fierce glint in her eyes that matched Arlo's own. And a touch of insanity, Arlo replied, grinning despite himself. The ship hummed beneath them, a reminder of the journey ahead. It would be a hard fight, but Arlo had never been one to shy away from a challenge, even when the odds were less than favorable. As they sped through the void, the stars stretching into streaks of light outside the viewport, Arlo knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. With sarcasm, grit, and a whole lot of human stubbornness. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out on top. Let's get to work, he said, and the team set about their tasks, ready to take on whatever the universe and Verky threw their way. In space, as in life, there were no guarantees, but as long as they were breathing, they had a fighting chance. And that was more than enough for Arlo Vex and his ragtag crew of cosmic misfits. Arlo Vex paced the cramped confines of the ship's control room, the walls seeming to close in like the universe's worst claustrophobic nightmare. He could almost hear Verky's laughter echoing in his head, a mocking ghost haunting every corner of his mind. The transmission from their nemesis had left the crew in a state of edgy anticipation, the kind that turned casual pessimism into a full-blown art form. We should have asked Verky for pointers on how to be an irredeemable jackass, Arlo muttered, scratching at the stubble on his chin like it owed him money. Lorna was hunched over the console, her fingers a blur across the keys. Right, because taking advice from him would go as well as a lead balloon in a vacuum. Maybe he could publish a self-help book, Zeke chimed in from his seat, legs propped up with a casual insolence. How to Lose Friends and Influence No One, bestseller material right there. A sudden jolt rattled through the ship, sending Zeke's legs crashing to the floor. The lights flickered ominously, the kind of effect usually reserved for bad horror movies and even worse real-life scenarios. "Ah, there it is," Lorna said, voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint. "Our ship's impression of a dying star." Arlo leaned over Lorna's shoulder, peering at the readouts. "What the hell was that? Looks like something's messing with the power grid," Lorna replied, her brow furrowing with concentration. "And by something I mean someone," Zeke groaned, picking himself up. "Great. Sabotage. Just another day in the life of cosmic punching bags. Check the systems," Arlo ordered, his voice sharp. "We can't afford to sit here dead in space while Verky's out there playing scavenger hunt with dark matter." Lorna's fingers flew over the console, her expression a mix of frustration and determination. "Best guess. Someone's hacked into our systems. Maybe a little gift from Verky. Thoughtful bastard." Arlo clenched his fists, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Can you fix it?" "Depends," Lorna said, shrugging one shoulder. "Got any duct tape and a manual on alien tech?" "No." "Then it'll take a minute." Zeke snorted, shaking his head. "Oh sure, let me just check the glove box for alien instruction manuals right next to my patients." "Just do what you can," Arlo said, trying to keep the frustration from his voice. "We're not giving up just because Verky wants to play dirty." "Wouldn't dream of it," Lorna replied, her eyes still glued to the screen. "Though if he wants to send over the instruction manual for his tech, I wouldn't say no." As Lorna worked her magic on the controls, Arlo turned his attention to the viewport. The stars outside were a constant reminder of the cosmic chaos swirling around them, and he could almost feel the dark matter calling out, a phantom whisper on the edges of his consciousness. "What about those symbols on the comet?" Zeke asked, breaking the silence. Could they be connected to all this? Arlo considered it, the memory of those eerie symbols glowing in the sulfuric atmosphere of Comet X-43 still fresh in his mind. Maybe. If those symbols are some kind of alien code, it could explain how Verky's crew managed to hack us, like a universal security override. "Fantastic," Zeke said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're up against cosmic hackers with cheat codes. What's next? Alien tech support?" "Hope so," Arlo replied. "Although I'd hate to be on hold for eons. Anyway, we need to figure out what those symbols mean." "And how do you propose we do that?" Lorna asked, pausing in her work to look at him. "It's not like we can just Google alien hieroglyphics. Think outside the box," Arlo said, tapping his temple. "We've got more than just tech. We've got human ingenuity, improvisation, maybe even a bit of luck." Zeke snorted, folding his arms. "Luck. I think we left that back on Earth, along with any sense of self-preservation." "Hey, it got us this far," Arlo replied, shooting him a grin. "Now let's put it to work," Lorna sighed, shaking her head. "You know this far involves a lot of near-death experiences, right?" Details," Arlo muttered, waving a hand dismissively. "Anyway, how's it going with the systems?" Lorna cracked her knuckles, a determined glint in her eye. "Just about there, but I'll need you two to keep an eye out for any more unwanted guests." "You got it," Arlo said, moving to the viewport, eyes scanning the inky blackness of space. "Zeke, with me, keep your blaster ready." Zeke grunted, a resigned look on his face as he joined Arlo. "So, are we expecting company or just playing it safe?" "With Verky, it's best to assume the worst," Arlo replied, gaze fixed on the distant stars. "Better to be overprepared and under attack." Zeke smirked, checking his weapon. "Words of wisdom from Captain Vex. Next you'll be telling us to trust no one." "Hey, I'm full of surprises," Arlo said, casting a quick glance at Zeke. "Like the fact that I even have a plan." "And what plan is that exactly?" Zeke asked, raising an eyebrow. Arlo hesitated, the truth hanging in the air like a cosmic punchline. "Stay alive, find the dark matter, and make sure Verky regrets ever crossing us." Zeke chuckled, shaking his head. Simple, I like it. The ship's lights flickered again, another reminder of the precariousness of their situation. But rather than dampen the mood, it seemed to only stoke the fires of their determination. They were human, damn it, and they'd fight their way through this cosmic mess with every ounce of grit and stubbornness they could muster. A sudden beep from the console broke through the tension, and Lorna's voice followed it, triumphant. Got it. Systems are back online, no thanks to Verky's lousy attempts at sabotage. Arlo let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Nice work, Lorna. Now let's get those engines fired up. We've got a comet to revisit. Zeke pushed off from the wall, a renewed sense of purpose in his step. Back to the sulfur and graffiti, huh? Can't say I'm not looking forward to it. Well, it's either that or sit here waiting for Verky to make the next move, Arlo said, moving to join Lorna at the controls. And I'd rather be proactive. Proactive. That's one way to put it, Zeke said, strapping himself in. Arlo couldn't help but smile, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They had their ship back, their wits about them, and a hell of a lot of human stubbornness. Let's make it count, he said, and with a flick of the switch, the ship's engines roared to life, a defiant shout against the void. As they sped back towards Comet X-43, Arlo couldn't help but feel a strange sense of exhilaration. The odds were stacked against them, sure, but that was nothing new. In fact, it felt almost comforting in its familiarity, a cosmic constant in an ever-changing universe. Back to the sulfur mines, Lorna quipped, a grin on her face as she guided the ship through the stars. With any luck, we'll find out what those symbols are really for, Arlo said, his mind racing with possibilities. And maybe even get the jump on Verky. Here's hoping, Zeke said, though there was an edge of optimism in his voice that hadn't been there before. As the comet loomed into view, its sulfuric atmosphere swirling like some kind of celestial drunkard, Arlo felt a renewed sense of determination settle over him. Whatever the symbols meant, whatever secrets the comet held, they'd uncover them, one way or another. Ready for round two? He asked, glancing at his crew. Always, Lorna said, her fingers steady on the controls. Zeke simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the viewport. Let's do this. With a sense of grim determination, the ship descended towards the comet's surface, the glow of the symbols once again visible through the viewport. It was time to unravel the mysteries of Comet X-43 and maybe, just maybe, turn the tables on Verky and his cosmic cohorts. As they touched down on the comet's surface, the symbols beneath them flickering with that eerie light, Arlo knew they were in for a fight. But they were ready. They were human, after all, and if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving against the odds. Arlo squinted at the glowing symbols on Comet X-43 through the viewport, resembling the kind of cosmic graffiti only an intergalactic vandal could pride himself on. So, any bets on what kind of cosmic bad joke these symbols are trying to tell? He asked, half smiling at his ragtag crew. Lorna, ever the picture of sarcastic resilience, tapped a few more keys, causing the console to emit a disgruntled beep. Pretty sure they spell out no trespassing in some alien language. But hey, when did we ever let that stop us? Right, Zeke chimed in, adjusting his blaster with the grace of a man resigned to his fate. Because sneaking past alien security systems has always been our forte. Like a cat burglar without the cat-like grace or the loot. More like a bull in a china shop, Arlo muttered, glancing at the controls. But let's see if we can be a little more subtle this time. Their plan, improvised at best, suicidal at worst, as Arlo decided it was time to find out just how valuable human stubbornness could be against a field of alien tech. The Verky, cosmic jerks that they were, had deployed a massive energy barrier around the ritual site on the comet. Going around it would mean a detour longer than Zeke's patience, and through it seemed like an essay in masochism. So, what do we know about this barrier? Arlo asked, leaning against the console as if casual indifference could somehow tip the odds in their favor. Lorna glanced up, her eyes scanning the myriad of data like a seasoned gambler at a high-stakes poker game. "It's strong enough to fry us like bacon in a solar storm, but if we can disrupt the power a bit, we might just scramble its frequency long enough to slip through." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that? Ask it nicely. Or maybe flash it a winning smile, with a bit of human ingenuity," Lorna shot back, a grin tugging at her lips. "And maybe a little help from the comet itself." Arlo nodded, clenching and unclenching his fists. "Right. We slap together something that can tweak the energy field enough to create a gap. Just a sliver." Zeke snorted. "Sounds like a plan hatched by a desperate fool. Which means it's probably our best shot. And if nothing else," Lorna added, giving the console another quick tap, "at least we'll go down in a blaze of glory, or stupidity. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Their destination was a precarious little cove on the comet's surface, close enough to the symbols to be significant but just outside the glaring neon keep-out lines drawn by the Verki. As their ship settled onto the unwelcoming terrain, the sulfuric atmosphere enveloped them like the bad breath of an ancient beast that had eaten something questionable for dinner. Arlo secured his helmet, the filter humming to life with a sense of reluctant duty. "Let's not dawdle. I'd rather not become a permanent fixture here." The crew disembarked, their suits sealing them off from the comet's less-than-charming atmosphere. The symbols loomed, glowing with that eerie luminescence that suggested either alien wisdom or a very elaborate prank. Lorna crouched near one of the symbols, her experienced hands gently probing the alien script. "Looks like some kind of power conduit. If we can disrupt it here, we might just mess with the barrier itself." "Great," Zeke said, his voice crackling over the comms. "We just have to figure out how to disrupt advanced alien tech with. What exactly? Our charm and good looks." "Got it covered," Lorna replied, retrieving a small device from her pack, something that looked suspiciously like the love child of a welding torch and a hairdryer. "I call it the universal annoyance. If it can't break through, it might just piss it off enough to do the job." "Let's hope the Verki's barrier has a sense of humor," Arlo quipped, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Because we're gonna need all the laughter we can get." He took position near Lorna, his eyes flicking between the device and the glowing symbols. "All right. Let her rip." With a flick of Lorna's wrist, the device came to life, emitting a low hum that grew into a shrill whine. The symbols brightened, almost as if protesting the indignity of being tampered with by such primitive means. But slowly, the energy field began to waver, flickering like a neon sign on its last legs. "Keep it steady," Arlo urged, watching as the barrier's glow wavered like a bad TV signal. "We're almost there." Zeke kept a lookout, his blaster ready. "Got a feeling our cosmic friends might come to investigate, like the worst party crashers in the universe." The barrier flickered again, and for a brief, tantalizing moment a gap appeared, a thin line of nothingness in the glowing field. "There!" Lorna exclaimed, her voice barely containing her excitement. "That's our window." "Move it." They darted through the gap, the taste of adrenaline sharp in Arlo's mouth as they breached the perimeter. Just as suddenly, the barrier snapped back, the gap closing like a cosmic trap. "Made it," Zeke said, a mixture of relief and disbelief in his voice. "Not over yet," Arlo cautioned, scanning their surroundings. "We need to find out what these symbols are guarding." The surface of the comet was uneven, its landscape a chaotic jumble of glowing glyphs and rocky outcroppings. It was like a treasure map designed by a sadist, endless riddles with no clear answers. "Any bright ideas?" Zeke asked, his voice echoing slightly in the silence of his helmet. Lorna considered, her eyes narrowing at the shifting glow of the symbols. "The center. If there's a control point for the barrier, it'll be there." "The heart of the beast," Arlo muttered, nodding. "All right, let's find this control point before the Verki decide to join the party." They moved cautiously, each step a gamble on the comet's treacherous surface. The glow of the symbols pulsed in time with their movements, adding to the sense of urgency that gnawed at Arlo's gut. Finally, they reached a central nexus, where the symbols converged in a dizzying swirl of light. It was beautiful in a kind of look but don't touch way, the kind of beauty that often ended in disaster if properly poked. "Well, this looks promising," Lorna said, kneeling to examine the glowing patterns. "Or maybe it's just a cosmic game of Simon." Zeke kept his blaster ready, ever the cautious optimist. "If so, I hope we're winning." Arlo allowed himself a moment of contemplation before speaking. "Okay, Lorna, think you can work your magic here?" "Magic, huh?" Lorna replied, setting up her device. "Guess it's as good a term as any." She began her work, the device humming in strange harmony with the symbols. The energy pulsed in waves, a dance of light and shadow that seemed almost sentient in its complexity. "Feels like we're in the eye of the storm," Zeke muttered, his eyes darting to the horizon. "Let's hope it stays calm." Arlo kept his focus on Lorna, watching as she manipulated the symbols with deft precision. "You got this, Lorna. Just keep doing what you do best." She didn't reply, her concentration absolute, fingers moving like an artist sketching the outline of chaos itself. Slowly the symbols began to shift, their glow intensifying as the Nexus responded to her touch. The ground trembled beneath them, a low, ominous rumble that resonated in Arlo's bones. Is this supposed to happen?" Lorna paused, her brow furrowing. "It's a feedback loop, the barrier's fighting back." "Great," Zeke said, his voice tight with tension. "Love a good underdog story, but I prefer it when we're the underdogs." "Then here's our chance to switch roles," Arlo said, determination etched in every word. "Lorna, can we use it to our advantage?" She nodded, adjusting the device. "If I can sync it with the barrier's frequency, we might just cause a short circuit, but it'll be risky." "What's life without a little risk?" Arlo replied, urging her on. "Go for it." The device whined, the sound rising to a crescendo as Lorna fine-tuned its output. The symbols glowed fiercely, their light building to a blinding crescendo. "Brace yourselves," Lorna warned, and with a final adjustment she triggered the device. The world exploded into light and sound, the energy field collapsing in on itself with a deafening roar. The ground shuddered, the symbols fading into darkness as the barrier disintegrated into nothingness. As the dust settled, Arlo found himself grinning, a wild, triumphant grin that spoke of narrow escapes and the thrill of defying the odds. "Well, that's one way to make an impression." "Don't get too comfy," Zeke cautioned, scanning the horizon. "I'd bet all the dark matter in the universe that Verky's not going to take this lying down." "Let him come," Arlo replied, a new edge to his voice. "We've got a taste for this now." Lorna chuckled, shaking her head. "And here I thought we were the sane ones, but I guess sanity's overrated." With the barrier down and the symbols dormant, their path was clear. Arlo looked at his crew, feeling the weight of their shared determination. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and light years away from home. But they were human. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was making the impossible possible, one irreverent, defiant step at a time. "Let's finish what we started," Arlo said, his voice steady and sure. "For us, for the dark matter, and for making Verky eat his smug transmissions." With renewed purpose, they pressed on, each step a testament to their resilience, their resourcefulness, and their refusal to back down in the face of cosmic adversity. They were in this fight to win it, no matter what the universe threw their way. The ship's control room wasn't exactly a hotbed of optimism. Arlo paced like a caged animal, his mind racing faster than the Verky's latest insult-filled transmission. Every corner of the ship felt like it was closing in, the metal walls listening to their every complaint, ready to compound their misery with another malfunction. Lorna was hunched over at the console, a determined frown etched into her face. "I've got good news and bad news," she announced. "Start with the bad," Arlo said, stopping mid-pace. "The power grid's still a mess. We might have a small chance of holding things together if we duct tape it with hope and some well-placed kicks." "And the good?" Arlo asked, already regretting the question. "We've got enough power for one more attempt at the barrier, assuming the universe doesn't decide to screw us a new one." "Well, it's something," Arlo sighed. "At this point I'll take not completely doomed." Zeke sauntered in, his blaster slung over his shoulder. Heard we're a new low, must be Tuesday. Not just any Tuesday, Lorna quipped without looking up. It's the kind of Tuesday where the universe flips you the bird and calls you names. Ah, a classic, Zeke replied, settling into the nearest chair with the kind of grace only desperation can bring. Arlo ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. All right, team, we need a plan that doesn't involve us being space debris, open to suggestions. How about we redefine success as still breathing, Zeke offered. Lorna snorted. Or maybe we promise to haunt Verky if we bite it. Ghosts must be at least slightly annoying. The way I see it, Arlo said, rubbing his chin, we either figure out a way to stabilize our power long enough to steal some dark matter, or we invent a time machine, go back and slap ourselves for taking this job. Time travel's not in the budget, Lorna noted dryly, her fingers dancing over the console. But I might have a workaround. Arlo's interest piqued. Workaround? Sounds like witchcraft. Witchcraft science at this point, who cares about labels? Lorna replied, her smirk belying her focus. If we can reroute the energy from the symbols on the comet, we might just coax the ship into behaving. Zeke raised an eyebrow. And what's plan B? Ask the Verky nicely to share their toys. Plan B is optional, Lorna shot back. But plan A is risky enough to qualify as a bad decision, and I'm all for bad decisions if they come with a side of survival. Arlo nodded, weighing their dwindling options. Looks like another trip to the comet is in order. Any chance for a quick pep talk before we tempt fate? We're alive, we're stubborn, and we're human, Zeke said. That's gotta count for something. Right, Arlo agreed. Let's go prove it. The crew suited up, the metallic hiss of their helmets sealing against the comet's toxic air. Arlo glanced at the viewport, catching a glimpse of the endless stars. They seemed indifferent, twinkling away as if unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding below. The comet's surface welcomed them back with its usual charm, jagged, uneven, and glowing ominously underfoot. The symbols stretched out like a cryptic message that only the universe could decipher. What's our target this time? Zeke asked, his voice crackling over the comms. We need to find a new focal point, Lorna explained. Somewhere central that can give us enough juice to compensate for our power grid issues. Central, as in the heart of darkness, Arlo quipped, eyes scanning the alien landscape. More like the heart of please don't kill us, Lorna replied, pointing toward a cluster of symbols that pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm. They trudged onwards, each step a negotiation with gravity, terrain, and the nagging thought of Verky breathing down their necks. The comet felt alive, its surface shivering with a barely contained energy that made Arlo's skin prickle. Finally, they reached the cluster, a nexus of light and strangeness that seemed to hum with potential. Lorna knelt, inspecting the symbols with her usual mix of skepticism and curiosity. Think this is it? Zeke asked, keeping a wary eye on their surroundings. It has to be, Lorna concluded, setting up her device. If we can sync with this, we might just get the boost we need. Or we might explode in a spectacular display of oops, Arlo added, though he couldn't help but smile. Spectacular's our thing, Zeke shrugged. Worst case scenario, we become legends, or at least a cautionary tale. Lorna activated the device, its hum rising to a familiar whine. The symbols reacted, their glow intensifying, pulsing in time with some unseen heartbeat. Arlo held his breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on him. Any second thoughts? Zeke asked, his tone lighter than the situation warranted. Plenty, Arlo admitted. But let's roll with it. What's life without a few existential crises? The symbols flared, light cascading over them like waves crashing on a shore. The ground vibrated, the air thick with anticipation, and for a moment all was still. Come on, baby, Lorna muttered, her eyes glued to the device. Just a little cooperation. As if in response, the symbols pulsed one final time, their glow stabilizing into a steady rhythm. The device beeped, signaling a connection. We're in, Lorna announced, her relief palpable. That was almost too easy, Zeke remarked, casting a nervous glance around. Don't jinx it, Arlo cautioned, though he shared the sentiment. With the power rerouted, they made their way back to the ship, the comet's surface fading behind them like a bad memory. The hum of the ship's systems was a welcome sound, reassuring in its monotony. Back in the control room, Arlo surveyed the readouts. "Looks like we might just pull this off," he said, a note of hope coloring his voice. "Let's not start celebrating yet," Lorna reminded him. "We've still got Verky to deal with." "Right," Arlo nodded. "But at least now we have a fighting chance." Zeke chuckled, a low, sardonic sound. "A chance is all we need." "That and a little dumb luck. And if all else fails," Lorna added, "we'll make the Verky's day a little more interesting." The air in the control room felt lighter, charged with a newfound sense of possibility. They weren't out of the woods yet, but at least they had a direction, a path forward in the dark. "All right, let's get ready," Arlo said, determination rolling off him in waves. "We've got a universe to surprise." As the crew prepared for what lay ahead, the hum of the ship seemed almost like a heartbeat, steady and defiant. They were battered, they were weary, but they were far from beaten. In the vastness of space, the stars watched silently, their indifference a reminder of the smallness of their struggles. But for Arlo and his crew, that smallness was everything. It was hope, it was defiance, it was life itself. And that was enough. "Let's go," Arlo urged, a grin spreading across his face like a sunrise in a world that had almost forgotten the light. "Let's make some noise." And with that they launched back into the unknown, ready to face whatever the universe dared to throw their way next. Back in the ship's control room, the air was thick with the familiar scent of recycled despair. Arlo was pacing again, wearing a path in the metal floor as he mulled over their next move. It might have been Tuesday, but it felt like a Monday. You know, the kind where the universe wakes up, chooses violence, and decides you're the perfect target. Lorna was hunched over the console, her fingers dancing over buttons like they were auditioning for a particularly cynical space opera. "I've got an idea," she said, the words so loaded they could sink a small moon. "Spit it out," Arlo replied, pausing mid-step, wondering if this was his punishment for not believing in karma. "Remember how Verky's tech is leagues ahead of Ior's?" Lorna asked, not waiting for a reply. "Well, I think I found a flaw." Zeke perked up from his slouch, where he was pretending not to pick at his blaster's settings. "A flaw in Verky's tech? You sure you're not high on recycled oxygen?" Lorna shot him a look that could melt a comet. "No, idiot. I mean a real flaw. Their tech is advanced, but it's too advanced." Arlo frowned. "How is that a flaw? Sounds like the opposite of a flaw." "It's like having a state-of-the-art spaceship but no idea how to change a tire," Lorna said, her voice tinged with a hint of madness. "Their stuff relies on everything running perfectly. One hiccup, and it's like a house of cards in a hurricane," Zeke chuckled. "You're saying their fancy tech can't handle a little chaos?" "Exactly," Lorna nodded. "And if there's one thing we humans excel at, it's chaos." Arlo's eyebrows knit together as he pondered this new angle. "You think we can disrupt their systems?" "Not just disrupt," Lorna said, leaning over the console, her eyes alight with a dangerous excitement. "We can make them implode. We just need to introduce a paradox." "Paradox?" Zeke echoed, blinking. "Like trying to lick your own elbow." "Close," Lorna said, smirking. "More like trying to divide by zero." Arlo's pacing halted. "You mean we can use a paradox to screw with their systems?" "That's our master plan." "Pretty much," Lorna replied, her fingers a blur on the console. "If we can hack into their mainframe and inject a paradox, it could cause a cascade failure." Zeke looked impressed. "Lorna, you may just be the most terrifying person I've ever met." "Thank you," she said, not taking her eyes off her work. "I'll take that as a compliment." "But there's a catch," Arlo interjected, knowing that optimism was a luxury they couldn't afford. "What's the risk?" Lorna hesitated, a rare moment of uncertainty. "If it fails, well, their systems might just fry us instead." Zeke shrugged. "So, business as usual, I'm in." Arlo nodded, feeling a strange mix of dread and hope. "All right, what do we need to make this work?" "Access to their network and a bit of luck," Lorna said. "And maybe a way to convince them to lower their shields." Zeke tapped his blaster thoughtfully. "I can think of a few ways to convince someone." "Let's save the fireworks for later," Arlo cautioned. For now, we focus on how to get inside their network. Verky isn't just going to hand us the keys to his digital kingdom, Lorna pointed out. We'll need a distraction. Something big, Zeke added, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Something they'll remember. Arlo thought for a moment, then a grin spread across his face. I think I have just the thing. The plan was simple, in the way that juggling flaming chainsaws is simple. They had one shot to create chaos so vivid, so blindingly human, that it would draw Verky's attention away from their true goal. With the Comet's symbols providing the juice they needed, they had a chance to push their ship's capabilities to the limit. And then some. As they geared up for their audacious plan, the crew felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. It was the kind of reckless, stupid bravery that humans were renowned for, the sort that made for legends or obituaries. "Ready?" Arlo asked, slipping on his helmet with a snap that echoed like a funeral knell. Zeke gave a thumbs up, his grin wide and reckless as he checked his blaster. "Born ready, Captain." Lorna's eyes were fierce behind her visor. "Let's show Verky what it means to be human." With their hearts pounding like a tribal drum, the crew set their plan into motion. The comet's surface loomed beneath them, a silent witness to their insanity. Arlo took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tug of gravity as they descended. "This better work," he muttered to himself. "It'll work," Lorna replied over the comms, her voice steady and sure. The plan hinged on them creating a spectacle so grand that it would pull Verky's focus away from their true objective. It was risky, reckless, and probably stupid, but it was their best shot. As they landed on the comet, Arlo felt the familiar crunch of alien dust underfoot. They moved quickly, setting up their equipment, every second ticking down like a countdown to doom. Zeke's task was simple: cause as much chaos as possible. And if there was one thing Zeke excelled at, it was chaos. He grinned, firing up the comet's symbols with a reckless abandon that would have made any sane person cringe. The symbols flared to life, casting an otherworldly glow on the landscape. "Here goes nothing," Zeke said, as he activated the device that would send a pulse of energy through the comet's surface. The ground trembled beneath them, a deep, resonating hum that seemed to vibrate through the very core of their beings. The symbols pulsed in response, a kaleidoscope of light that painted the sky in a dizzying array of colors. "That's our cue," Lorna said, her fingers flying over the console as she hacked into the Verky's network. Arlo watched, feeling the weight of the universe's indifference pressing down on him. This was it. Their one shot. The symbol's light danced in time with a rhythm that only the universe could hear. The ground beneath them shivered, a tangible reminder of the power they were wielding. And then, the pulse hit. The comet's surface erupted in a spectacular display of light and sound, a symphony of chaos that echoed through the void of space. It was beautiful, in the way a supernova is beautiful, destructive, awe-inspiring, and utterly indifferent to the lives it might claim. "That's got their attention," Zeke said, his voice barely audible over the roar. "Good," Lorna replied, her focus unbroken as she breached the Verky's defenses. Arlo could feel the tension building, a crescendo of anticipation that set his nerves on edge. This was it, the moment they'd been working toward. Lorna's fingers danced across the console, injecting the paradox into the Verky's systems. It was a simple equation, a riddle that had no answer, a loop with no end. For a moment, nothing happened, and then all hell broke loose. The Verky's systems shuddered under the weight of the paradox, a cascade of failures spreading like wildfire through their network. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the seamless harmony of their advanced technology began to unravel. "Did it work?" Zeke asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. "It worked," Lorna confirmed, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. Arlo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We did it," but their victory was short-lived. The Verky, for all their arrogance, were not without their own tricks. The ship shuddered as energy surged through the comet's surface, a retaliatory strike that threatened to consume them. "Hold on," Arlo shouted, gripping the console as the ship bucked beneath them. Zeke cursed, holding onto his blaster as if it were a lifeline. "Looks like they're not going down without a fight." "We need to get off this rock," Lorna said, her voice strained but determined. Arlo nodded, his mind racing as he calculated their options. They'd come too far to be undone by a final twist of fate. With the Verky's systems in disarray, they had a narrow window to escape, but they had to move, and fast. "Prepare for liftoff," Arlo ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. The ship's engines roared to life, a defiant protest against the forces that sought to crush them. The ground trembled as they lifted off, the comet's surface receding beneath them. As they broke through the atmosphere, Arlo felt a surge of relief. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd turned the tide. But the battle wasn't over yet. The Verky might have been thrown into disarray, but they weren't defeated, not by a long shot. Still, as they soared through the stars, Arlo couldn't help but smile. They'd taken a stand, defied the odds, and in true human fashion, they'd made the impossible possible. For now, that was enough. As the stars stretched out before them, endless and indifferent, Arlo knew they had one hell of a fight still ahead. But they were alive, they were human, and they were ready. "Let's make some noise," Arlo said, a grin spreading across his face as they sped toward the next chapter of their cosmic adventure. The hum of the escape thrusters was like music to Arlo's ears, if music was composed by sadistic robots with a penchant for rattling nerves. But hey, at least they were still in one piece. For now. He glanced at Lorna, who was busy doing her best impression of a tech goddess, fingers flying over the console like a caffeinated spider. "You ever think we ought to get hazard pay for this kind of work?" she snorted, not bothering to look up. "If we were smart, we'd get life insurance first." Zeke chuckled from where he was strapped in, one hand wrapped protectively around his blaster as if it were a teddy bear. "Yeah, but then they might start asking uncomfortable questions, like why are we still alive?" Arlo couldn't help but grin. It was moments like these that reminded him of why he enjoyed this insane line of work. "Speaking of staying alive, how's our paradox working out, Lorna?" Lorna gave a triumphant whoop, sounding for all the world like a kid who'd just aced a test she hadn't studied for. "Their systems are eating themselves alive. It's like watching a snake choke on its own tail." "Good," Arlo replied. "Let's keep them busy while we make a beeline for the dark matter." The ship shuddered under another wave of retaliatory fire from the Verky. If there was one thing Arlo could count on, it was their relentless stubbornness. The Verky might have had tech that made theirs look like a tin can with a few string attachments, but they lacked the one thing humans excelled at, the glorious, unfettered embrace of chaos. "Lorna, any chance we can get a visual on that dark matter before we're turned into space dust?" Arlo asked, doing his best to sound like he hadn't just swallowed a bucket of nails. "Already on it, boss," she replied, her fingers dancing across the console. The screen flickered, projecting a map of the comet's surface, pinpointing what they all hoped was their prize. "Bingo, it's right beneath us." Zeke straightened, his earlier nonchalance replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. "So, are we doing this the classic way? Or has Lorna cooked up another harebrained scheme? Why choose when we can do both?" Lorna shot back, her voice carrying the kind of manic glee that made Arlo question her sanity. "We can dig it up the old-fashioned way while making sure the Verky don't realize what's happening until we're long gone." "Works for me," Arlo said. "Zeke, you ready to play babysitter?" Zeke grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Always wanted to try my hand at babysitting a few million credits worth of dark matter." With the plan set, Arlo directed the ship back down onto the comet's surface, landing with the grace of a hippo doing ballet. The comet's dust puffed up around them, creating a smog-like haze that obscured everything beyond the viewport. "All right, team," Arlo said, unstrapping himself and standing up. "We've got a few minutes tops before the Verky realize we've pulled a fast one. Let's make them count." Zeke and Lorna nodded, their faces set with determination. It was the kind of determination that only came when you were moments away from getting vaporized but still had a job to do. Stepping out into the alien dust, Arlo felt the familiar weight of his helmet as his boots crunched beneath him. It wasn't comfortable, but that was the least of his worries. They made their way to the excavation site Lorna had marked, the symbols beneath them glowing faintly with the energy of a dying star. "Here we are," Zeke said, kneeling down and starting to dig like a dog looking for a buried bone. "Let's see if this rock wants to give up its secrets." Lorna joined him, setting up the equipment they'd need to extract the dark matter without causing an explosion that had turned them all into stardust. Arlo kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Verky reinforcements. The ship sat ready, engines idling like an impatient driver at a red light. "How's it coming?" Arlo called, his voice crackling over the comms. "Slow," Lorna replied, sounding like she'd rather be anywhere else. "But steady. Just keep an eye out for." The ground shook, a violent tremor that sent them all stumbling. Arlo swore, grabbing onto the ship's landing gear to steady himself. What now? The Verky had gone and done the one thing they were good at, overreacting. A massive silhouette loomed in the sky above, a vessel so large it blotted out what little light the comet had. It was a vessel designed for one thing and one thing only: domination. "Looks like our friends brought out the big guns," Zeke said, squinting up at the behemoth. "Should we be flattered or pissed?" "Let's go with pissed," Arlo replied. "How much longer on the extraction?" "Just about there," Lorna said, her voice tense as she worked. "Hold 'em off for a bit longer, we've got this." Arlo took a deep breath, his hands tightening around his blaster. They were so close. Just a few more minutes and they'd be in the clear, assuming they could survive that long. "Zeke, you ready for a little more chaos?" Zeke grinned, standing up and brushing the dust from his knees. "Born ready." Together they took up positions around the extraction point, blasters at the ready. The Verky ship loomed above them, a shadow of impending doom that promised to swallow them whole. But Arlo wasn't going down without a fight. Not now. Not ever. As the Verky descended, they opened fire, bolts of energy searing through the air around them. Arlo and Zeke returned fire, their shots wild but effective in the way that only humans could manage. They weren't out to win a war, just buy a little more time. Lorna's voice crackled over the comms, a lifeline in the chaos. "Almost there. Hold on." Arlo ducked behind a rock, feeling the heat of a blast whiz past his ear. "No rush, Lorna. It's just our lives on the line." Zeke laughed, a sound that was half madness, half defiance. "Yeah, no big deal, just another day at the office." The Verky ship fired again, a blast so powerful it sent shockwaves through the ground. The rock Arlo was using for cover exploded, sending shards of debris flying. He barely had time to duck, feeling a shard slice through his suit. "Arlo, you good?" Zeke yelled, firing off another round. "Peachy," Arlo replied, yanking the shard out with a wince. "Lorna, if you've got any more miracles, now would be the time." The Verky forces were closing in, their relentless advance unstoppable. But then, just as all seemed lost, Lorna's voice came over the comms, brimming with triumph. "Got it." The dark matter was theirs. Arlo couldn't help the rush of relief that surged through him, a sweetness that cut through the tension like a razor. It was over. They'd pulled it off. "Time to go," Arlo ordered, scrambling back to the ship with Zeke and Lorna hot on his heels. They piled into the ship, the ramp closing behind them with a hiss that sounded like salvation. Arlo slammed his hand onto the controls, the engines roaring to life as they lifted off, leaving the Verky behind in a cloud of dust and frustration. As they shot away from the comet, Arlo took a moment to catch his breath. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd secured the dark matter. Now all that was left was to survive the trip back. "Nice work, team," he said, turning to his crew. "Let's get home before the Verky decide to try anything else." Lorna grinned, looking equal parts exhausted and exhilarated. "Think they'll miss us?" Zeke stretched out in his seat, looking as relaxed as if they'd just been on a leisurely stroll through a park. "Nah, we're unforgettable." Arlo couldn't help but laugh, the tension easing from his shoulders. They were alive. They'd done the impossible. Now all that was left was the journey home and whatever came after. As they sailed through the stars, Arlo knew one thing for sure. No matter what the universe threw at them next, they'd face it together. After all, they were human, and that meant they were as unpredictable as they were indomitable. "Let's see what fresh hell awaits us on the next job," Arlo said, a grin spreading across his face. And with that, they set course for home, ready to face whatever came their way. The ship hummed along, a metallic giant content with its own existence among the endless specks of stardust. Arlo leaned back, trying to ignore the throbbing reminder that he wasn't invincible, not without consequence. Around him, Lorna and Zeke were doing their best impressions of humans who had just narrowly cheated death and found it mildly amusing. "Well, we did it," Zeke offered, breaking the silence that was starting to feel like an unwelcome guest. He stretched, arms behind his head, as if showing off just how nonchalant he could be. "Stuck it to the Verki and made off with their lunch money." "Yeah," Arlo replied, rubbing at the makeshift patch he'd slapped over the tear in his suit. "Just another day in paradise, right?" Lorna snorted, not even bothering to look up from the console where she was pretending to do something useful. "If paradise involves nearly getting fried like bacon, sign me up for a vacation." "Next time," Arlo said, "remind me to bring sunscreen. SPF 1000. They all chuckled, the sound echoing off the metallic walls of their cramped little home in the void. It was a sound they needed, a balm for the simmering nerves that still crackled with the energy of near disaster. "So," Lorna said, finally tearing her eyes away from the console, "what do we do with a couple million credits worth of dark matter? Besides selling it and living like kings, obviously. How about a nice beachfront property on Earth?" Zeke suggested, smirk in full bloom. "I hear the radiation makes sunsets a real treat." "Or we could just throw the whole lot into a black hole," Arlo said, leaning forward. He was joking, but there was an edge to his voice that said maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "See if it spits out anything interesting, like a portal to a universe where this job doesn't suck." Lorna laughed, a short bark that was more genuine than before. "Oh sure, let's just blow our hard-stolen treasure on science experiments." "The Corp would love that." "Imagine the bonus," Zeke said, eyes twinkling. "They'd probably even give us a commendation for bravely contributing to the field of theoretical physics by being idiots." They shared another laugh, the kind that binds people together when the universe throws its worst at them, and all they can do is laugh back in its face. Arlo took a deep breath, feeling the weight on his shoulders lessen, even if just by a fraction. As far as victories went, this was one for the history books. Not that anyone would ever get to read it, assuming there was still a future beyond the chaos they'd just unleashed. "So," he said, turning to Lorna, "how's the ship holding up?" "We made quite the impression landing back there. She's in one piece," Lorna replied, giving the console an affectionate pat. "More than can be said for some of us." She cast a pointed look at the makeshift bandage on Arlo's arm. "Hey, chicks dig scars," Arlo quipped, wincing as he shifted in his seat. "Besides, what's a little shrapnel between friends?" "Sure, Arlo," Lorna said, rolling her eyes. "I'll remember that next time we're dodging alien artillery." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after you've cheated death and lived to tell the tale. Arlo watched the stars slide by, a never-ending river of light, their journey continuing despite all the insanity they'd left behind on that comet. "Do you think the Verki will miss their little science project?" Zeke asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Not for long," Lorna said, her fingers idly typing across the console. "They're too busy licking their wounds to worry about us." Arlo nodded, resting his head back against the seat. "Good. Let them chase their tails for a while. We've earned a break." "Lucky us," Zeke said, propping his feet up on the dash. "We get to relax while the rest of the universe tries to kill us." Arlo chuckled, eyes on the endless void outside. "Yeah, but at least we're doing it together," Lorna sighed, leaning back in her chair. "So what's next, Captain, after we cash in our prize?" "Retirement," Arlo said with a grin. "Or as close to it as we can get in this line of work." Zeke snorted. "Retirement? You'd be bored in a week." "Would not," Arlo said, though he knew Zeke had a point. The idea of sitting around doing nothing, it was more terrifying than facing down a Verky battleship. "Fine," Lorna said, shaking her head. "How about we just aim for not dying for a while? Sounds like a plan to me." They all nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. Yeah, that sounded pretty good. Not dying was always a solid goal. As they sat there, the ship cruising through the void, Arlo couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. They'd done the impossible once again. They'd taken on the universe and won for now. And sure, the future was uncertain, but that was half the fun, wasn't it? "Hey, Lorna," Arlo said suddenly, "you ever think maybe we're in the wrong line of work?" She looked at him, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Only every damn day, boss," Zeke chuckled, tossing his blaster from hand to hand. "But where's the fun in being sensible?" A laugh escaped Arlo before he could stop it, and he felt the tension drain away just a little more. "Yeah, you're right. Sensibility's overrated." They lapsed back into silence, the kind that was far from awkward but rather the shared calm of having survived hell together. At least for now they could pretend everything was fine, maybe even believe it. "Do you ever wonder," Lorna said after a while, her voice soft, "what they are really up to, the Verky, I mean?" "Conquering the universe, I expect," Arlo replied. "Or collecting stamps." "Hard to tell with those bastards." "Whatever it is," Zeke said, "they're terrible at sharing." Lorna shook her head, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Maybe we'll find out one day. Or maybe we'll be too busy making trouble of our own to care." "Either way," Arlo said, "I'd rather be out here causing chaos than sitting pretty on some safe little planet." "Here's to causing chaos, then," Zeke said, raising an imaginary glass. "To chaos," Lorna echoed, a rare, genuine smile breaking through her usual cynicism. "To chaos," Arlo agreed, feeling the weight of the universe lift if only a little. They'd made it this far and they'd keep going come hell or high water, because that's what they did. It's what they were good at. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The ship continued its journey through the stars, and for the first time in a long time, Arlo felt like maybe everything would be okay. Not perfect, but okay. Which, all things considered, was pretty damn good. As they cruised through the dark, Arlo knew their story was far from over. There would be more battles, more near-death experiences, more madness. But they'd face it all together, laughing in the face of the universe's worst. Because in the end, what else could they do? In the vast, indifferent stretch of space, Arlo found a measure of peace. The sort that comes not from safety, but from understanding that nothing was certain and that was okay. They'd keep pushing forward, one insane adventure at a time. "Let's see what fresh hell awaits us on the next job," Arlo said, a grin spreading across his face. And with that they set course for home, ready to face whatever came their way.